Let's move to our next talk. I have always the idea that everybody knows me, so I forgot that it is not true. Today, no. Today I remember. So I am Ariel Monafo. I am founder of Marketer Group, which IsraelCloud is part of it. We have a presence in a few countries, and also another company that is Cloud Edge, and lately a non-profit organization that is called CISP, all around cloud computing. But I think that now it's the time to really talk about Zero Trust. And with us in our panel are Sharon. How are you, Sharon?
Hi. It always makes me funny when I have to speak with Israelis in English. So I was once in an elevator. It was in Santa Clara when people still used to travel. And there was someone that told me, you know, I didn't recognize him. So we were in an elevator in a conference or something like that. And he tells me in Hebrew, in American accent, something like, Shalom, good morning. So, you know, I felt it was good. And I said with a heavy American accent, I said, Ani lo medaberet ivrit tova. So he looked at me and he said something like, Sharon, אתה לא מזהה אותי? זה קובי, מה קרה לך, אחי? כאילו, ואני קובר את עצמי, בגילי אני כבר לא מזהה, לא זוכר כלום, לא... אז...
So we will stick to English right now.
Okay,
so great. Sharon, just a few words about you and your role in Guardicore.
Yes, so my name is Sharon. I'm serving as the Vice President of Business Development at Guardicore, focusing on the ecosystem and the technology alliances and the different partnerships that we have in place.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. And hi, Eran. How are you?
Hey, fine, Ariel. How are you?
Great, great. So can you also a little words about you and your role?
Sure. No issue. So I'm a system engineer at Guardicore, senior system engineer, working with technical side for many accounts on many different continents. You know, working with customers, initial implementations, helping with the technical issues. That's it.
Right. So we will talk about Zero Trust. We hear a lot about it, and I don't know if everybody knows really what is Zero Trust. So Sharon, if you can enlighten us.
Yeah, sure. So Zero Trust is basically a security strategy and a concept. It was originally developed by the consulting group Forrester about 10 years ago, but started to gain a lot of popularity in recent years. Behind the concept is the idea is that unlike other security practices where authorization and approvals are granted once an identity or process, business process is approved, with Zero Trust, you assume that you trust no one and nothing. Think about what Oz just said about input validation, right? You cannot assume that an entry to a form or any application is valid unless you really need to check it. And with Zero Trust, you actually extend this concept into additional layers. So behind this novel concept is that as a security paradigm, you are looking into 5 different entities. You look into your data, you look into your networks and the networking, users, workloads, and devices, how they interact, and set different policies on them where you've got visibility into everything that you are doing, and management, reporting, and orchestration on top of that. And this basically, if you trust no one, never, and you always authorize, you always assume the worst, then you can try to take or assume control over what you're developing. And again, just to emphasize, this is Zero Trust is not a product, it's not a solution, it's a concept. And therefore, we can see many different implementations of this idea. One last comment about it is that Forrester, that originally coined the term, is actually now being accepted also by other consulting teams like Gartner, that typically doesn't like to do or to repeat what Forrester are saying, and vice versa. But Forrester took the concept and they created something that is called the Zero Trust extended ecosystem, understanding that it's almost impossible to have a single set of a solution that can address all the different requirements.
Okay.
I will also comment for a second area that for the Cloud Security Alliance, we basically called it software-defined perimeter, SDP, and it was a concept that we started even before Forrester started the Zero Trust. But as the market started using the term Zero Trust, we now call it software-defined perimeter and Zero Trust, a lot of innovation. And there is a working group inside the Cloud Security Alliance that is creating the next standards, the next best practices for the SDP and Zero Trust. So feel free to join this working group and get a head start of new specification and features on top of it.
Yeah, actually, you can see a lot of innovation coming from Israel in this area of SDP related to what, again, the analysts call today ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access, as one aspect of creating access to the networks, combining between users, identity, data as part of the elements of Zero Trust.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Moshe, I knew that you want to say something. We are recording and talking a few times a day, maybe sometime. So I knew that you wanted to add something. And now maybe Ran, you told us that you are working with a lot of customers. Can you give us examples of we don't use the word problems, the challenges that companies are facing around the Zero Trust?
Sure. So I can give you an example from my personal experience because I like to, talk about what I did. So I had the pleasure of working with a large banking institution in Asia that had the issue that they wanted to implement Zero Trust in their network for a regulation they had to comply with. So they needed to basically segment core servers, users, processes that shouldn't communicate, make sure that only the specific flow that should work will work. So for example, if you have an application that should talk to another application, it should not talk to anyone else apart from that, right? Or the application that is getting the traffic only gets the traffic from the specific user and app process that should communicate to it, right? So we worked on identifying the specific application who initiated the connection, the user identity, whether it's the device identity also, if it's an endpoint, a remote endpoint, a VDI, a server, what is it? What is it trying to contact me? And we did everything basically for them to help them work with this regulation. And basically the end result was that they were pretty surprised of how fast we can do it and how quickly it was to help them meet the regulation. But yeah, for sure we have many of these projects. Usually it's revolved around, like I mentioned, the segmentation of core features and applications and users.
Okay.
Excuse me?
No, I said, Moshe, maybe you had a question to ask?
Yeah, I was just trying to emphasize it. So basically, we always talk about microsegmentation in SDN environments. So I understand that with you guys, what you're paying, we can do segmentation without the SDN infrastructure. This is correct?
Yes, absolutely. So SDN basically is another layer for the networking. We do software-defined security. So we apply the security as an overlay on top of the existing infrastructure. So basically it means that it doesn't matter if you have a legacy environment, if you have an SDN environment, if you have an on-premise or cloud or containers or virtual or bare metal machines, or even remote endpoints, we can apply the segmentation and the security as an overlay on top of the existing network, regardless of the infrastructure.
So bottom line, I can say this server can only talk in this protocol, in this identity, in this port with the other servers, but the infrastructure will remain the same. You're doing it because of the agent that is installed on top of the environment.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, if you think about it, Moshe, when you're talking about the cloud, and it could be an all cloud, hybrid, multi, or whatever, the dynamics of the network as we know it are changing a little bit. It's very difficult to place a single choke point at the entrance. The workloads themselves needs to be dynamic with or without SDN. So the approach of creating an overlay security on top of the existing networking means that you don't have to change your network, you don't have to change your provisioning and orchestration and whatever you are used to or that you are planning. And this allows you to create a security layer that is totally independent from the network. Having said that, there's a much bigger importance for being decoupled from the infrastructure in the era of containers and Kubernetes, because with container-based networking, everything that we've used to know about TCP/IP-based routing and the way that the network behaves, the stuff that we've learned, hard lessons in the early 90s, are no longer true, because now you've got another orchestrator that is managing the networking configuration for you. Everything that Oz spoke about regarding API and the importance to manage APIs and application-wise and so on are even more important, but then the way that the network behaves is totally different. So your networking-based segmentation, the way that it used to work, is no longer adequate in such a scenario, and this makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because when we started doing information security, I mean, you started a couple of years before me, and I joined in. By the way, I joined into information security because of you. I'm not sure you ever heard this story.
No, you can. Yeah.
We will leave it to the later.
To tell stories about me recently. So what's another one among friends? Please do.
Yes, one word. I was working for Nest Technologies, and we never had a security department. Sharon was managing Publicom along with another guy, and they were very successful. So one day the CEO came over and told me, told myself and my colleague, which was Alon Mansur, another famous name around here, and told us that we need to set up a security department that looks like Publicom, the same way that Sharon and Eli built their companies. So this is why I went into security, because Sharon was so successful and we needed a competition.
That's a nice story, and I really hope that this session is being recorded somehow.
It is.
Willing to repair to that any day. But bottom line, so we spent the beginning of our career moving security from the host to the network DLP, network IPS, and explaining all the people why is it so important to have them as a choke point. And now we spend our our latest days moving them back to agent-based. And this, I found this funny, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does, and it's not because I think that the fundamental shift is the IT stack. This was changed. It is being changed, and to protect it, one should be changing the way that is facing security. A lot of the concepts that we are talking about and the stuff that you are doing with the CSA are not new, but implementation, emphasize, and where to focus, I think, or creating a risk-based approach towards how to implement those controls is what being shifted and changed.
Okay.
Okay. So after we talk, I hope that we make some great explanation around the zero trust. Also, your question have from the audience. We will talk a little bit about hybrid cloud, and like we try to help understanding what is zero trust. We will try to do the same with hybrid cloud. That it's I don't know if it's a topic or a buzzword, because if you talk to 10 people, you will get 20 answers what is really hybrid cloud. We don't know if it's just having a connection from on-premise to cloud or having some products. There is still a lot of things to develop, I think, in this area to really build the right and secure way to connect on-premises to the public cloud. So Sharon, maybe you can start trying to really try to help us understand what is really hybrid cloud and how what problems are in this area.
So the way that I describe it, hybrid cloud is basically a cloud that is made out of different technologies that each one behaves and acts differently. And therefore, it creates interesting challenges in managing, in provisioning, in creating the different applications, but also in how do you secure the cloud. Now, in the cloud itself, if you look at a certain specific vendor that provide a cloud-based solution, it can be a public cloud, private cloud, whatever, there's typically a shared responsibility model where the cloud vendor is responsible for the infrastructure of the cloud itself, and the customer is responsible for the security of their pieces that are running there. In a hybrid cloud model where you've got more than a single vendor, now you're starting to have a problem of how do you manage the same level of security, trust, policies among multiple technologies that each one is managed separately and differently. And so this is the description in a high level. And if you try to take it into a more to the ground, it's at least the way that we at Guardicore see that the important things for us is how do you ensure that you can understand your users, applications, data, workload, everything that is described as part of a zero trust threat model. How do you see and visualize and see it in your entire hybrid model? Because, for instance, maybe you are working with one vendor and their visibility doesn't allow you to collect information about everything that the users are doing, etc. And if you've got limited visibility, then obviously your ability to set controls and enforce them are more limited. So the hybrid cloud basically takes the challenges of managing a single entity and multiply it by a factor which is much bigger and greater.
Okay, so I saw, by the way, an article of the CSA, Moshe, today that the new security model, I don't know if you had the chance to read it, but it's really, I think that, like you said, Sharon, things are changing, okay? We didn't have the Azure Stack or AWS Outpost before 2 years. I don't know if really before 1 year, it was really available to everybody, but also all the containers, Kubernetes, etc. So if it not was difficult enough to describe really what is a hybrid cloud, how do you see today the customer? How do it look an environment of a company that has some kind of hybrid cloud implemented?
Ran, can you describe one of the, one of your recent engagements or something like that? How a typical customer looks like?
Yeah. I recently worked with a company that has a hybrid cloud model like you described. Actually, they're deployed in several different clouds. And they use it basically, most organizations use it to distribute their loads, to basically use the best of each cloud. But the hybrid cloud model without a solution that is able to control it sufficiently is it's complementing the operations for the customers as they need to work with many different tools. But we also see, like you mentioned, that the use of Outposts and Azure Stack to extend the capabilities of the cloud to their own premise, basically.
Mm-hmm. Can you add, Sharon, on that?
Yeah, so many times organizations start on-prem. They used to have some sort of a data center, and then at one time they've added a public cloud vendor. Sometimes through the process they've added another one. But let's take the most simple, not the most, but a simple scenario, simple enough, of an on-prem data center with a couple of application databases, some legacy stuff, and then a newer cloud that is born for a specific application. And then you're starting to see the challenges of systems that used to be secure, used to be in a single enclave. Everybody knew how it's working, well understood risk and practices. And then by simply opening to the public cloud, and even if you're trying to place a choke point firewall on the entrance to the VPC and so on, everything becomes open. Virtualization creates emphasis on performance and scale. So traffic becomes more of an east-west rather than north-south. You're opening your additional cloud, different technology, and suddenly your attack surface is much bigger, and your ability to protect it is being reduced. And that's today, in my opinion, is becoming the norm. Organizations that started and shifted suddenly started to add more clouds, more deployments, and even the vendors themselves, the cloud providers, do not have the same set of capabilities across all regions. On top of that, add suddenly some privacy compliance requirements, the need to address the data differently because you would like to operate in a certain geography, and this creates an additional layer of complexity that the security solution should be able to address.
But diving in, can you emphasize a little bit about the segmentation options that we have? I mean, in the cloud, we are very much segmented, SDN, microservices. How does it look like when we're talking about hybrid cloud?
So, to be fair, segmentation is not new, right? Cisco, I think, introduced VLANs-based segmentation somewhere in 1995 or 1996. Don't catch me on that. Before that, we implemented firewalls and circuit gateways and things like that. In the cloud, you've got, depending on the vendor, you can implement security groups or a network access groups, etc., which are basically the current or the cloud version of VLANs. The challenge becomes when you're trying to configure segmentation for protection. Every regulation requires segmentation. It doesn't matter if you are a merchant that would like to handle credit cards and you are being asked by PCI to segment your credit data elements, or if you're a bank that or an organization that is transferring money with SWIFT, or basically any regulation out there requires separation, segmentation, etc. So that being able to do it in an agile and I'm using this quote unquote because it's agile means many things to many people, but mostly in a DevOps and cloud environment, we're talking about speed, being able to do it fast, being able to do it automatically. So microsegmentation in our approach is ability to define control to flows, processes, data, users, application, FQDN, or their combinations without affecting the networking itself, without affecting the application, and being able to set it across your entire workload from AS400, legacy Unix systems, all the way to the latest and greatest Kubernetes-based systems, without the need to have multiple management consoles, without the need to go and change applications, etc. Everything with a click of a button, or even better, with through some sort of an automatic API process that is driven by some sort of security as a code concept.
Okay, and I was sorry, I was a minute. And how does identity fit in? I mean, we talked a lot about network segmentation, but we all know that networking segmentation is one part of the equation, and it's not doesn't cover everything. And in the cloud, mostly my segmentation is really based on identity. I mean, two services can talk if they have a role. So how do you fit the identity data into this?
Yeah, so that's actually a very good question. Basically, I didn't plan to go into a self-promotion here of our specific solution, but since you've asked, I'll just say a sentence that the way that we operate is different than most of firewalls that needs to look at the traffic itself, understand what's going on, and then determine based on the traffic flow. We make a security decision on each and every workload based on the process and the metadata that is surrounding it. So you've got a process that creates some sort of a socket that opens a flow. On the other way, on the other side is something that is listened to, and we do it on the metadata that is surrounding it. And the metadata elements includes a user identity, user role, and this is tied back to the orchestration of the system. I think that if I need to use my crystal ball and guess how solutions would look like in the future, we will see more solutions that try to address the problem that you are describing directly at the orchestration level. So going through the different provisioning system and then trying to configure the identity and access management roles and the role-based access control properly. Advantages, disadvantages as well. At the end, I think that we will see a hybrid solution that treats identity and access management as the next network-based foundation. There are already places where you must use it today due to a lack of visibility, like functions, etc. But even there, you can start to see companies that instrument the code itself, so that you could enforce network-like controls in the code.
So segmentation is basically not complete until you take network data, metadata from the cloud environment, including the identity, the process, and then you build your entire knowledge. I mean, it's the process, it's the identity, it's the network segmentation. Those are all the tools that you need in order to build one rule set of who can talk to who. Correct?
In our opinion, yes. And if I may try to stand on the shoulders of giants And if we look on how network security evolved over the years, right? Taking from an access control concept into the concept of, okay, it's not enough to do access control and some proxying. I need now to actually to combine all the flows together to create something like a stateful inspection. It's not enough to set control without understanding the state of each connection. Fast forward about 15 years later, nothing really happens in the networking until someone came and said, you know what, it's not enough to understand the state, you also need to understand the application itself and the users. Fast forward 15 years later, nothing really happens in security until you've got what I believe we are pioneering, which is the ability to set a microsegmentation based on the entire metadata and doing things a little bit differently. So the network by itself is not just examining the traffic is not enough.
I remember in one of the earliest projects, I'm talking about the earliest 90s, we gave the entire bank static IP addresses because they wanted to give rules per user. So they needed to attach to every user a static IP address. So we managed like 15,000 private IP addresses, static IP addresses for each.
I can tell you that some banks still do it today. Others allocate pool IPs per users. You can still see people that authenticate, and there's some freaky radius private extensions that give specific IP addresses to users. And those are the things that really holding organizations back.
Okay.
So it's still out there.
Yeah. So we are running out of time. We are wrapping things up. Eran, somebody asked about connecting in a hybrid environment to the cloud. So you want to cap a little bit about what you wrote in the answer?
Yeah, sure. All right. So basically the question was the recommendation of how to connect the cloud environments to the local environment. And I wrote that it's of course, we need to enforce device and user identity. There are many ways we can make this kind of connection. It depends on the type of asset that you want to consume in the cloud. If you have a specific service, you want to connect to your on-premise data center, maybe through a VPN. But as I wrote at the end, it's very important to have a visibility solution on top of the security that makes sure that only the specific application, service, and identity of the three accessing the core services in the data center is actually happening correctly. So the visibility here is a key part for the forensic evidence and the quality assurance that the policy enforcement is sufficient. Okay, so you can create, for example, like I mentioned, VPN site-to-site from specific cloud providers to your on-premise data center to make sure the connection is private. You need to make sure that the identity and the process application is the one that you should be contacting, and it's accessing the correct assets in your own on-premise data center. And of course, have the tool to identify what is happening.
Okay. Guys, anything we missed here? Ariel, anyone of you?
Maybe you just, or Sharon or Ran want to say a few words to summarize. Or if not, Moshe, do is always well. So it depends to you.
But I'm okay with Moshe summarizing, especially after he said so many nice things about us. So please.
And it is not easy for to hear good things from Moshe.
Yeah, I know. It's like.
So thank you, Sharon, for letting me in the security world. Just kidding. So first of all, thank you everybody who participated for this. We will send later on some surveys about if you enjoyed this session and what can we improve. So please be helpful and fill those out so we can produce better events later on. I want to thank Oz for his lecture. I want to thank you, Sharon and Ran. It was really interesting learning about next generation isolation. And I always thought that those type of capabilities are only exist in the cloud. So now I understand that using Guardicore, we can also import them into the on-premise environment, which is important. I keep waiting for the fact that there will not be any on-premise, but I think we have to wait another decade or so. And we still have to find solutions for those environments. So the hybrid approach is the best. And now we better understand how to do isolation. So thank you, Aran. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Ariel, for hosting this panel. And who am I missing? Stav and more behind the scenes. Thank you for arranging this.
And also Sharon around the scenes.
Yes. Sorry if I missed anyone. My apologies. So thank you all, guys, and have a great night.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.